Hey guys, there is a silent, terrifying tragedy happening to millions of men right now. And the absolute worst part is that it looks exactly like success. You wake up one morning, you look in the bathroom mirror, and you realize you are 40 years old. You have the house in the suburbs, the impressive job title, the 2 cars in the driveway, and a retirement account that is slowly growing. By every single metric that modern society uses to measure a man, you have won the game. But deep down in your chest, there is a heavy, suffocating emptiness that you cannot simply ignore anymore. The greatest tragedy of turning 40 is not financial failure, and it is certainly not a lack of professional achievement. The ultimate tragedy is realizing that you have spent the last 2 decades being incredibly busy in a life that does not even belong to you. You have not lost your money. You have quietly and systematically lost yourself. 2,000 years ago, the great Stoic philosopher Seneca looked around the wealthy, bustling Roman Empire and observed this exact same psychological trap. He wrote in his profound essay on the shortness of life that no person would ever hand out their money to random passers-by. Yet to how many people do each of us freely hand out our lives? He noted with complete bafflement that human beings are incredibly tight-fisted when it comes to guarding their physical property and their financial wealth. Yet they think absolutely nothing of wasting their time, which is the one single thing about which they should be the toughest and most ruthless misers. To truly understand the gravity of this situation, you must look objectively at how you have constructed your adult life. Society told you that the ultimate goal of a man is endless productivity and constant motion. We have been heavily brainwashed to equate busyness with supreme importance. You work 60 hours a week. You commute for 2 hours a day in heavy traffic. You answer corporate emails at 9 o'clock at night. And you collapse into bed completely exhausted, falsely believing that this severe exhaustion is a permanent badge of honor. But what is the actual point of all this chaotic motion you are running at maximum speed on a treadmill that someone else plugged in and programmed for you? Imagine a highly successful mid-level executive living in a spacious home in the American Midwest. He spends 50 weeks out of the year enduring a soul-crushing corporate grind just so he can take a 2-week vacation to a crowded resort in Florida. He sacrifices his physical health. He misses his children growing up, and he completely neglects his own internal peace of mind, all to secure the fleeting approval of a regional manager who would replace him in a heartbeat if he dropped dead tomorrow. He is highly successful on paper, but he is completely bankrupt in his soul. This is the silent tragedy of the modern man. You have traded the irreplaceable currency of your mortal existence for the empty calories of social validation and material accumulation. You are not truly living. You are merely existing, desperately waiting for some imaginary future date when you will finally be allowed to relax and be yourself. The highly practical Stoic advice for this exact moment of midlife awakening is to radically audit your daily busyness. You must stop looking at your bank account to measure your wealth and start looking at your calendar. You must forcefully ask yourself if the endless tasks consuming your days are actually meaningful to you, or if they are simply the heavy chains of a life script written by the crowd. By completely recognizing this silent tragedy, You take the very first and most crucial step toward reclaiming your mind, breaking the illusion of busyness, and finally stepping out of the exhausting performance that has stolen the first half of your life. To fully break free from the exhausting performance that has consumed the first half of your life, you must confront the most dangerous lie that modern men tell themselves every single day, which is the illusion of tomorrow. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca diagnosed this specific delusion over 2,000 years ago, when he observed that it is not at all that we have too short a time to live, but that we squander a great deal of it. He declared that life is long enough, and it is given in sufficient measure to do many great things if we spend it well. But when it is poured down the drain of luxury and neglect, we are finally driven to see that it has passed by before we even recognized it passing. We do not receive a short life. We make it short by treating our time as if it is an infinite resource. If you are a man over 40, you are likely suffering from a severe case of deferred existence. You operate under the fundamentally flawed assumption that you will finally begin to actually live your life at some unspecified date in the future. You tell yourself that you just need to grind through another 15 years of a stressful corporate career, pay off the suburban mortgage, and reach retirement age, and then you will finally be allowed to relax, travel, and pursue your actual passions. You are constantly planning to live, but you are never actually living. Seneca warned his students against this exact trap, pointing out how foolish it is to put off for the future everything that belongs to us. He stated that people who live on hope find every present moment slipping away, as they are taken over by greed for things that are to come. You must understand the brutal logic of time. What you call the future is happening right now, and a large part of it is already past, because the time you have lived is already where it was before you were alive. We are entirely wrong to think that death lies ahead of us. The reality is that much of death has passed us by already. For all of our past life is currently in the grip of death. Imagine a 45-year-old regional manager who works 70 hours a week and constantly ignores his family. He misses his children growing up. He ruins his physical health, and he suppresses his own soul, all because he believes that when he hits 65, he will buy a boat and finally be happy. He is trading the only reality he actually possesses, which is the present moment, for a ghostly future that is absolutely not guaranteed to arrive. He is acting like a fool who borrows the smallest, cheapest items and acknowledges the debt, but considers himself indebted to absolutely no one when taking up his own precious time. The practical Stoic advice for this stage of your awakening is to completely destroy your reliance on the future. Seneca wrote that we should prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life, that we should postpone nothing, and that we should balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. If you lay your hands on today, you will find that you are far less dependent on tomorrow. You must stop treating your days as cheap commodities to be traded for future comfort. You must realize that time alone is truly yours, and nature has put you in possession of this one fleeting, slippery thing by ruthlessly cutting out the illusion of tomorrow and seizing the absolute reality of today. You stop being a slave to a future that does not exist, and you finally begin to command the life that is happening right in front of you. Once you fully recognize the devastating illusion of tomorrow, you must immediately confront the exact reason why you so willingly traded your precious present moment for a ghostly future in the first place. You did it to purchase the applause of a crowd that does not even care about you. This brings us to the third profound realization of your midlife awakening, which is the inescapable and exhausting trap of external validation. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius observed this tragic human tendency nearly 2,000 years ago when he wrote in his private journal that he was constantly amazed by how easily we love ourselves above all others. Yet we put far more stock in the opinions of others than in our own estimation of self. To understand the sheer absurdity of this behavior, you must logically dissect the psychological treadmill you have been running on for the last 20 years. Society convinced you that human worth is directly measured by material accumulation and social status. You genuinely believed that if you worked incredibly hard to acquire the right possessions, you would finally secure the respect of your peers and achieve lasting happiness. So you sacrificed your 20s and your 30s grinding in a corporate office to afford a massive 4,000 square foot house in an exclusive suburban neighborhood. You leased a $90,000 luxury vehicle to park in your pristine driveway. You bought expensive tailored suits and designer watches, but look at the actual reality of your daily existence. You are working 80 hours a week and suffering from chronic high blood pressure just to make the monthly payments on a house that you are barely ever awake to enjoy. And who exactly are you trying to impress with this flawless suburban display? You are exhausting your mortal life to impress a neighbor who is secretly drowning in massive credit card debt and who only sees your car for 30 seconds every morning. You are desperately trying to win the approval of passing strangers on the interstate who are completely absorbed in their own miserable commutes. You are effectively purchasing things you absolutely do not need, using money you do not actually have, to impress people you do not even like. The ancient Stoics understood that the very second you tie your personal happiness to the shifting opinions of the crowd, you voluntarily hand over the absolute control of your own mind to complete strangers. The ancient Stoics clearly recognized that social status is nothing more than empty noise, heavily influenced by the temporary moods of highly flawed individuals. An emerald does not suddenly lose its extreme value simply because no one is standing around cheering for it. The Stoic teacher Epictetus explicitly warned his students that if you ever turn your attention to external things so as to wish to please anyone, you can be absolutely assured that you have completely ruined your scheme of life. When you require the admiration of your coworkers to feel successful, you give them the exact same weapon they will eventually use to destroy your fragile ego. The highly practical Stoic advice for this critical stage of your journey is to aggressively starve your desperate need for external validation. You must look closely at your bank statements, your daily habits, and your career goals, and ruthlessly ask yourself, how many of these choices were made simply to curate a flawless public image? You must deliberately stop performing for the imaginary audience in your head. When you finally stop negotiating your own self-worth with a chaotic society, You immediately reclaim all of the massive mental energy you were previously wasting on invisible status games. By completely refusing to participate in the exhausting competition for public applause, you step off the treadmill entirely, securing an unbreakable inner peace that no luxury vehicle or corporate promotion could ever possibly provide. Once you stop exhausting your mental energy on the invisible status games of the crowd, you are inevitably forced to confront the terrifying silence of your own mind, which brings us to the fourth critical realization of this midlife journey: the consumption of empty calories of existence. When a man reaches his 40s and subconsciously realizes that his expensive suburban house and his impressive corporate title have not actually brought him any profound peace, a massive psychological void opens up inside his chest. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca recognized this exact behavioral pattern in the Roman Empire, observing that when human beings are faced with the brevity of life and the emptiness of their pursuits, their minds prefer to amuse themselves rather than actually restore their health. Seneca noted that instead of seeking a genuine cure for their spiritual sickness, people desperately distract themselves with trivialities, turning their precious leisure time into a frantic escape from their own thoughts. To understand why you do this, you must look at how you behave between the hours of 6 o'clock in the evening and midnight. You have survived another grueling day at the office. You pull your luxury vehicle into the driveway, and you walk into your quiet home. But instead of using this free time to examine your life, to study philosophy, or to cultivate your character, you immediately reach for a psychological anesthetic. You turn on the television and deliberately subject yourself to 2 hours of highly polarized, enraging political news, becoming furiously angry about macroeconomic events that are entirely outside of your absolute control. You pour yourself 3 glasses of expensive bourbon to dull the persistent anxiety vibrating in your stomach. You pull out your smartphone and scroll mindlessly through endless streams of trivial information, or you engage in bitter arguments with complete strangers on the internet over things that do not matter in the slightest. The Stoic teacher Epictetus specifically warned his students about this exact trap, instructing them to avoid talking about trivialities like gladiators, horse races, food, drink, and especially gossiping about other people. In the modern world, your gladiators are professional athletes. Your horse races are the daily fluctuations of the stock market, and your gossip is the toxic corporate politics you bring home from the office. You are gorging yourself on the empty calories of existence. You are deliberately filling your mind with artificial outrage, cheap entertainment, and chemical numbing agents because you are absolutely terrified of sitting alone in a quiet room with nothing but your own conscience. You use busyness and trivial drama as a shield to protect yourself from the devastating realization that you might be living your life entirely wrong. But the ancient Stoics deeply understood that you cannot cure a sick soul by simply distracting it. The highly practical Stoic advice for this stage of your awakening is to initiate a ruthless fast from these empty psychological calories. You must completely cut off your consumption of toxic news media, mindless digital entertainment, and unnecessary outrage. The next time you feel the overwhelming urge to turn on a screen or pour a drink the moment you get home, you must force yourself to do the exact opposite. Sit in a chair in absolute silence for 15 minutes. Face the emptiness directly. Let the uncomfortable thoughts rise to the surface of your mind without trying to numb them. By completely refusing to sedate yourself with the trivial distractions of modern society, you finally stop running away from your own life, allowing yourself to diagnose the actual root of your dissatisfaction and begin the real, arduous work of building a mind that does not constantly require an escape plan. As you finally sit in that absolute silence, completely refusing to sedate yourself with the empty calories of modern distractions, you will inevitably come face to face with the fifth and perhaps the most terrifying realization of your entire midlife journey. This is the profound psychological pivot where the ancient Stoic philosophy completely destroys your traditional understanding of human mortality. Most men over 40 live under the fundamental delusion that death is a dark, shadowy figure waiting patiently for them at the very end of a long road. Somewhere around their 80th birthday, you believe that death is entirely in the future. But the great Roman philosopher Seneca shattered this comforting illusion over 2,000 years ago when he wrote to his student that we are completely wrong to think that death lies ahead of us, because the brutal reality is that a large portion of death has already passed us by, and whatever years lie behind us are already safely in the grip of death. To truly comprehend the massive weight of this truth, you must look objectively at your own timeline. You are 45 years old. You likely assume that you still have another 30 or 40 years of life remaining. But Seneca is telling you that those first 45 years are already dead. They are entirely gone. They belong to the grave just as surely as a buried corpse does. You are not slowly marching toward death. You are actually dying every single day. Every time the sun sets, another unrecoverable piece of your existence is permanently handed over to eternity. When a modern man reaches his 40s and realizes the absolute gravity of this concept, he often experiences a severe existential panic. Imagine sitting in your quiet living room and looking at an old photograph of yourself from your middle 20s, when you had endless physical energy and massive, unbound dreams. A heavy, suffocating wave of regret washes over your chest as you realize you traded those incredibly vibrant years for a stressful middle management position, a massive 30-year mortgage, and the fleeting approval of a chaotic society that does not genuinely care about your soul. You think about the thousands of hours you spent sitting in miserable highway traffic, the countless weekends you sacrificed to answer meaningless corporate emails, and the endless energy you poured into accumulating luxury goods that brought you absolutely zero lasting peace. You desperately want to negotiate with the universe, offering to trade your expensive sports car and your large suburban house just to get 5 years of your lost youth back. But the universe does not negotiate. The time was spent, and the transaction is absolutely final. Your immediate biological instinct is to fall into a deep, paralyzing depression, frantically wishing you could turn back the clock. But the ancient Stoics deeply understood that mourning the unchangeable past is the ultimate waste of the tiny sliver of life you actually have left. The highly practical Stoic advice for this exact moment of midlife awakening is to radically sever your emotional attachment to your own history. You must look at your past the exact same way you look at a crumbled ancient ruin. By fully accepting the brutal reality that your youth is already dead, you paradoxically unlock an immense and powerful sense of psychological freedom. You permanently drop the heavy, exhausting corpse of your past mistakes, your failed relationships, and your missed opportunities. You are violently jolted awake, realizing that the only rational response to the fact that you are dying every single day is to fiercely and courageously command the life that is happening right in front of you, entirely dedicating your remaining time to the pursuit of true virtue and inner peace. When a man finally wakes up to the terrifying reality that his past is completely dead and his time is rapidly running out, his immediate psychological reaction is almost always a desperate attempt to radically alter his external environment. We commonly refer to this frantic period of behavioral change as the midlife crisis. You suddenly look at your suburban house, your 20-year marriage, and your predictable corporate career, and you incorrectly conclude that these external factors are the absolute root cause of your internal emptiness. You convince yourself that you are suffocating because of where you are and what you own. So you decide to take massive, impulsive action to drastically change the scenery. You trade in your reliable family sedan for a bright red, $100,000 sports car that can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. You suddenly abandon your career to move across the country, or you blow up your marriage to chase after a much younger partner, desperately hoping that these dramatic external shifts will magically make you feel young, vibrant, and alive again. But the ancient Stoic philosophers deeply understood the tragic flaw in this exact strategy. The Roman philosopher Seneca recounted a story about a wealthy traveler who complained that his extensive journeys across the world had not brought him any actual peace or wisdom. The great philosopher Socrates accurately pointed out to the man that he was completely miserable because he was constantly traveling with himself. Socrates asked if he had not better made himself another man than to constantly transport himself to another place. This ancient wisdom perfectly diagnoses the modern midlife crisis. When you buy the incredibly expensive sports car, you are still the exact same anxious, unfulfilled man sitting behind the leather steering wheel. When you move to a beautiful beach in Florida to escape your corporate stress, you pack your exact same insecurities, your deep regrets, and your lack of moral purpose right into your suitcase and bring them all with you. You absolutely cannot cure a sickness of the soul by simply changing your geographical location or upgrading your material possessions. The emptiness you feel inside your chest is not caused by a lack of horsepower in your garage or a lack of novelty in your daily routine. It is caused by a severe lack of philosophical alignment and moral virtue. You have spent decades completely ignoring your own character to chase the applause of the crowd. And now that the applause feels entirely hollow, you are frantically trying to buy a new life. The highly practical Stoic advice for this turbulent stage of your life is to completely abandon the childish illusion that a new toy or a new location will save your soul. You must stop trying to change the sky above your head and finally begin the arduous work of changing the mind inside your skull. The ancient Greeks called true happiness eudaimonia, which does not mean living it up with luxury, but rather making something profoundly good out of your life through your own rational activity. You create a good mood from your own internal thoughts, and if you act from true Stoic insight, your happiness absolutely cannot be destroyed by external events. The next time you feel the overwhelming urge to blow up your life or run away from your current responsibilities just to feel something new, you must forcefully pause and look directly into the mirror. By refusing the cowardly escape route of the midlife crisis and bravely choosing to face your own internal character flaws, you stop running away from yourself and finally begin the profound work of building a mind that is perfectly content no matter where you happen to be standing. Once you stop running away from yourself and completely abandon the childish illusion that a new sports car or a different zip code will cure your internal emptiness, you are finally ready to embrace the seventh and most empowering realization of this Stoic journey. You must recognize the massive, undeniable advantage of your own age. Modern society has conditioned you to view turning 40 as a tragic decline, a slow and painful descent into irrelevance. You are constantly bombarded with advertisements desperately urging you to buy expensive serums, extreme dietary supplements, and bizarre fitness routines just to cling to the fading ghost of your 20s. But the ancient Stoic philosophers held a radically different and vastly superior perspective on the aging process. The great Roman philosopher Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that we should cherish and deeply love our advancing years, because life is full of profound pleasure if a human being actually knows how to use it. Seneca deeply understood that the true beauty of getting older is the systematic shedding of exhausting desires. When you were 20 years old, you were entirely enslaved by your own biology and your desperate need for social validation. You cared deeply about what random strangers thought of your clothing. You desperately wanted to be invited to the most exclusive social events, and you measured your personal worth by your ability to dominate your peers. You were practically a puppet, constantly being pulled by the chaotic strings of youthful ambition and physical appetite. But as you cross into your 40s, an incredible psychological transformation naturally occurs. You begin to experience the profound clarity of maturity. The accumulated experiences of your past decades, including your painful failures, your broken relationships, and your major career setbacks, have silently transformed into the compound interest of your soul. You are no longer guessing about how the world works. You possess hard, undeniable, empirical data. Imagine a 48-year-old software engineer sitting in a massive corporate boardroom on a Friday afternoon. When he was 28, he would have been sweating profusely in his tailored suit, absolutely terrified of making a mistake, and desperately hoping the senior vice president would notice his brilliance. He would have sacrificed his entire weekend just to answer meaningless emails. But today, he sits in that exact same leather chair and sees the entire corporate hierarchy for exactly what it is. He clearly recognizes the frantic insecurity of the younger employees and the empty arrogance of the executives. He does his job with absolute excellence because that is his own internal standard of virtue. But he completely refuses to lose a single minute of sleep over office politics. When the clock strikes 5, he walks out of the building, gets into his vehicle, and goes home to his family, leaving the artificial stress of the corporation entirely behind him. He can do this because his age has given him the ultimate superpower, which is the ability to easily distinguish between what is genuinely important and what is absolute nonsense. The highly practical Stoic advice for this stage of your midlife awakening is to aggressively lean into the massive advantage of your accumulated years. You must completely stop apologizing for getting older and immediately stop trying to compete in the exhausting games of the youth. Your physical energy might not be exactly what it was 2 decades ago, but your psychological perspective is infinitely sharper. You now possess the rare and powerful ability to say no without offering any further explanation. You know exactly what drains your energy. You know which relationships are shallow and toxic, and you know that chasing the applause of the crowd is a fool's errand. By completely embracing the profound clarity of your current age, you stop mourning the dead past, and you start utilizing your hard-earned wisdom to construct a second act of your life that is built entirely on unshakable truth, absolute virtue, and unbroken internal peace. Once you have fully embraced the profound clarity and massive advantage of your advancing age, you are finally prepared to wield the most powerful psychological weapon in the entire Stoic arsenal. This is the ultimate awakener, the ancient practice known as memento mori, which translates to remembering that you must die. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the known world but still faced war, betrayal, and a devastating plague, bluntly reminded himself in his private journal that he did not have 10,000 years to live. He wrote that death hangs over you, and while you live, while it is in your power, you must be good. He also explicitly commanded himself to think of himself as dead, to realize that he had already lived his life, and to take whatever time was left and live it properly. To truly internalize the devastating power of this philosophy, you must stop looking at your life as an endless, stretching highway and start doing the brutal, objective mathematics of your remaining mortality. Let us assume you are currently 48 years old. If you are fortunate enough to live to the average life expectancy of roughly 80 years, you do not have an infinite ocean of time ahead of you. You have roughly 32 years. But break that down even further. That is only 32 summer vacations. That is only 32 Thanksgiving dinners with your family. If you sleep for 8 hours a night and work for 8 hours a day, the actual, conscious discretionary time you have left to truly experience your own existence is terrifyingly small. The ancient Stoics did not meditate on death to become morbid, depressed, or paralyzed by fear. They used the absolute certainty of death as a razor-sharp filter to ruthlessly eliminate every single thing that did not actually matter. Imagine a 48-year-old man who finally grasps this mathematical reality. He is sitting in his office on a Friday afternoon, and his arrogant supervisor demands that he cancel his weekend camping trip with his teenage son to finish a completely meaningless corporate report that no one will ever actually read. 10 years ago, this man would have immediately caved to the pressure, terrified of losing his precarious social standing in the company. But today, he views the demand through the lens of memento mori. He calculates the fact that his son will leave for college in exactly 4 years, meaning he only has 48 months left of childhood to experience. He looks at his supervisor, calmly declines the request, and walks out the door. He completely stops negotiating his personal value and his irreplaceable time with a crowd of people who will replace him within a week of his funeral. When you live with the constant, burning awareness of your own mortality, petty grievances instantly evaporate. You absolutely cannot bring yourself to care about a stranger cutting you off in heavy traffic, a jealous neighbor making a sarcastic comment about your lawn, or a minor fluctuation in your retirement portfolio. You realize that getting violently angry over these trivialities is like a man on a sinking ship complaining that his shoes are getting wet. The highly practical Stoic advice for this ultimate stage of your psychological awakening is to keep death visibly present in your daily life. You must use the undeniable reality of the grave to radically recalibrate your entire system of values. The very next time you feel the desperate urge to perform for an audience, to argue over a meaningless slight, or to delay your true passions for some imaginary future date, you must silently remind yourself that the clock is aggressively ticking down to zero. By staring directly into the face of your own mortality, you strip away all the suffocating illusions of modern society, ensuring that you do not waste a single second of your remaining existence on anything less than absolute excellence. When you finally look the reality of your own mortality directly in the face, you unlock the ultimate psychological freedom required to begin the second act of your life. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote an incredibly powerful directive in his private journal, commanding himself to think of himself as dead, to realize that he had already lived his life, and to take whatever time was left and live it properly. Most men over 40 look at the prospect of starting over and feel a crushing sense of profound failure. They believe that changing careers, scaling down their lifestyle, or completely altering their daily habits at this late stage means they have wasted their entire existence. But the ancient Stoic philosophers understood that the exact opposite is true. The first act of your life was essentially a chaotic, mandatory rehearsal. During your 20s and 30s, you were desperately trying to survive, building your basic identity, and exhausting yourself to prove your absolute worth to a society that never truly cared about you. You made terrible mistakes. You chased empty financial goals. And you handed your precious time over to people who did not deserve it. But the second act of your life is about profound refinement. You are not starting over from absolute zero. You are starting over from a foundation of hard-earned wisdom. You now possess the distinct, powerful advantage of knowing exactly what does not matter. Think about the massive relief of finally dropping the heavy, exhausting expectations of the crowd. You no longer need to exhaust yourself trying to become the wealthiest executive in your corporate office. And you no longer need to impress neighbors who are secretly drowning in their own massive debt. The highly practical Stoic advice for this ultimate stage of your journey is to ruthlessly cut away the heavy chains of your false obligations. You must forgive yourself completely for the decades you spent chasing the wrong things, because you made those specific choices with the limited knowledge you had at the time. Now that you possess the absolute clarity of middle age, you must act with fierce intentionality. If you need to walk away from a highly toxic career to preserve your mental health, do it without a single apology. If you need to downsize your massive suburban house to buy back your personal freedom and reduce your severe financial anxiety, do it with absolute pride. The only true failure in life is realizing that you are on the wrong path and cowardly choosing to stay on it simply because you have already spent 20 years walking it. You cannot control the chaotic nature of the external world. You cannot prevent sudden economic downturns. And you absolutely cannot turn back the clock to reclaim your lost youth. But you retain absolute, undisputed control over your internal response to these events right now. You can choose to step out of the exhausting performance, reclaim the absolute ownership of your mind, and dedicate your remaining time entirely to the pursuit of moral virtue and unbreakable inner peace. The choice is entirely yours. You can either continue existing as a tired prisoner of society, or you can finally wake up and truly live. If this profound Stoic philosophy has awakened you to the reality of your own potential, I want you to leave a comment below saying, "I am awake." Make sure to hit the like button so this vital message can reach more men who are silently struggling in the exact same trap. Finally, to continue building an unbreakable mind and mastering the ancient art of living, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our future lessons. Stay strong, protect your time, and I will see you in the next video.